Okay. So last time, we've discussed how to transition from uh, the statement of admission to a confession from the one you are interrogating. Okay. So we have different subjects and we have different ways how to interrogate them. In addition, yung mga natutunan ninyong mga techniques, pwede ring magamit dito, but we have to take some other notes para mas mainam, mas maayos, at mas makakakuha ka ng information mula sa mga iba't ibang subjects. Katulad ng mga to, ito yung mga special cases natin. First are children, the interrogation of children. So the necessity of the interrogation of children through the trial organ happens in the situation when the proceedings are conducted in the juvenile's case and in the adult's case. Juvenile witnesses take the floor, including a child being the victim of the offense. So may mga, alam naman ninyo to, may mga pagkakataon na ang biktima ay bata. The child should stand as witnesses. The child may also be a witness in the civil and administrative proceedings. So as we mentioned before sa last meeting natin, a human being in the course of their lives go through a lot of stages. So ibang phase ang pinagdadaanan natin sa buhay natin. Pagiging bata, pagiging adolescent, being a young adult, a young professional, and so on. However, the most vital changes in their organisms happen in their first 10 to 20 years of their lives. Such vital quantitative and qualitative changes cause the necessity of the modification of the interrogation. Kaya, habang dumadaan tayo sa iba't ibang phase ng buhay, nag-iiba din dapat ang technique na ginagamit natin kapag sila ay na-involve sa mga kaso. Iba ang gagawin nating interrogation techniques depending on who we are interrogating. In this study, the analysis of the interrogation of the child is not possible in particular age groups. May mga paraan sa pag-i-interview ng bata na hindi aplikable sa pag-i-interrogate ng mga matatanda. The rule is that the other child, the easier it is to establish the contact with them, obtain the spontaneous relation, full answers to questions, and others. It is important to realize the dissimilarity of the psyche and the juvenile's reaction to know the sources of advantages and drawbacks of the evidence from the testimony and general tactical rules being expressed in particular in the rules listed below. So first is the preparation of the interrogation includes the collection of the possibility through information about the child. So, kailangan mo munang makuhanan ng background, yung bata, para mas maihanda mo siya doon sa gagawin ninyong interrogation. So, you have to interview their parents, class tutor, baka meron siyang mga class teachers, yun, class advisor, and so on. The adequate preparation enables the proper decision to be made or the resignation from this action for their good. Baka kasi hindi good for the child's mental health yung pag-conduct ng interrogation. So, there is also a possibility na hindi mo na lang siya i-interrogate. So, depende nga, base dun sa magiging resulta ng interview mo, doon sa kanyang magulang or sa kanyang teachers or sa kung sino man na pwedeng bigay ng background sa'yo tungkol dun sa bata. At this stage, it may appear that it is necessary to consult the psychologist or even to order the psychological examination. Making preparations for the interrogation, the interrogator ought to consider the question of the potential recording of the interrogation on an audio or video cassette, which would be in particular advisable in the case of the interrogation of the child witness in the preparatory proceedings. So you may want to record the conversation uh, with the child. So yun. Second is to decide to have the interrogation exclusively when a considerable amount of time can be sacrificed to it. The place of the interrogation is also of great significance. Kaya dapat magiging maayos o maganda yung interrogation room. You cannot put a child kahit saan mo lang na gusto, pasok mo siya sa interrogation room. Hindi, baka ma-intimidate siya. The psychologists and criminologists emphasize the unfavorable influence of traditional places in which interrogation takes place. For instance, police stations, prosecutors' offices, and courtrooms. Baka hindi maging maganda ang resulta ng questioning mo kapag nilagay mo ang bata kaagad doon. So the atmosphere can unfavorably affect the content and the form of the testimony of the adult witnesses, to say nothing of the children. With the children, it may cause the inhibition of intellectual processes, anxiety, shyness, mistrust, and even fear. Nga naman, kasi diba, very intimidating ang dating ng mga ganong lugar. Police station, diba? Interrogation room. Okay. In order to minimize the stress connected with the interrogation and uh, conduct it in the most favorable for children conditions, special interrogation rooms are established. So, may mga props ka na pwedeng gamitin when you interrogate children. So, the stage number 3 is the stage of the preliminary conversation ought to lead to the actual establishment of the contact between the two sides. The interrogator should already in the stage adapt their vocabulary to the intellectual level of the child. The way you cannot use words uh, that are usually used for with conversing with older people. Hindi pwede kung papaano ka kumausap ng matanda, ay ganun rin ang paraan mo ng pagkausap sa bata. Katulad ng ginagawa natin ngayon. Of course, I speak in a level that you understand. Pero kung magsasalita ako at magpapaliwanag ako sa paraan na aplikable lang sa bata, baka mainis lang kayo sa akin. Diba? At wala rin kayo matututunan. Kaya, ganun din. Kapag kakausap ka ng bata, iba rin ang paraan ng pagsasalita mo. Siguro kung may mga baby sa inyo, sa bahay ninyo, o kaya may mga bata, di ba? Iba ang paraan ninyo ng pagsasalita. Nag-a-adjust kayo sa kanila. Ganon din kapag nag interrogate. Especially kapag nag interrogate ka. You have to adapt their vocabulary and to their intellectual level. At this stage, the interrogator should aspire to make the subject's emotion calm, which acts as a brake on the suspect. It acquires specific significance in the case of the interrogation of the witness victim of the crime. In the situation of the buildup of emotions of the interrogated child, the interrogator should not escalate them, but, for example, try to change the subject in a gentle way. Subsequently, he or she ought to come back to the previous topic without any clear transition. So kapag nag-escalate na yung emotions ng bata, ah, hindi mo dapat idiin doon yung interrogation mo. Kailangan ikaw malumanay ka. Kasi wala ka nang makukuha nun kapag sinabayan mo yung bata. The spontaneous relation of children frequently develops slowly and with resistance. Baka hindi ka patanggapin kaagad ng bata. It depends on the character, temperament, personal motives, and effectiveness of the preliminary stage. So lahat ng mga detalye o lahat ng mga information na makukuha mo kapag nagki-question ka na talaga, magbe-base sa kung gaano kaayos o gaano kainam yung nangyari during preliminary stage. The child ought to be neither urged or chastened. On the contrary, they should favorably be shown interest in and encouraged to make a statement. One should not show impatience, mistrust, irony, or irritation. All the more, interrupt when the suspect digresses from the subject. Hindi ka dapat mainis kapag lumalayo yung usapan ninyo. So, being a good interrogator, you have to make the child go back doon sa conversation ninyo. Pero hindi mo siya pwedeng pagalitan. Lalo na kung child uh, witness siya or witness victim siya. In many cases, it may appear impossible to obtain the spontaneous relation. In particular, it concerns the children under the age of 10. Then, one ought to move to the phase of questions. If it is difficult for the interrogator to obtain the spontaneous relation, they should ask the child to draw the thing which he or she has difficulty in talking about. Yun yung sinasabi ko sa inyo na props. Bigyan mo siya ng papel, ng mga pangkulay, pencil, and so on. Ipa-drawing mo sa kanya. Kasi may mga pagkakataon na ang bata, mas na-express niya yung sarili niya through drawing. Okay. The picture can be analyzed by the interrogator and the suspect. Due to the research conducted by the author, it appears that the application of the picture as the form of the child's expression produces good effects. The fact of the reflection of the content of the picture, which was found neither in the spontaneous relation nor in the answer to the asked questions, is the proof of it. The picture drawn by the child should be attached to the testimony protocol. So you may also submit that drawing as evidence when you make the child testify in court. Number 5, in the phase of questions, questions ought to be formed in a simple and clear way, thoroughly comprehensible, without any legal and medical jargon and expressions, and more difficult words should be exchanged with comprehensible ones or supplemented with a description. Yun nga yung sinasabi natin kanina, hindi mo siya pwedeng kausapin sa level na ng pagkausap mo sa matatanda. Kasi hindi pa ganun kalawak ang vocabulary nila. Kaya nga mahalaga rin na alamin mo kung ano yung mga bagay o mga salitang naiintindihan na niya. Magets mo na dapat yung vocabulary nila para yung paraan ng pagkausap mo sa kanya at his level. Or kung hindi mo man ma-translate yung word na yon, kailangan bigyan mo ng description yung word na yon para mas maintindihan ng bata. One should try to keep the unhindered atmosphere, giving the character of a conversation to the questions and answers. In case of doubt, as for the understanding of the uttered words by the child, he or she should be asked to explain them. Hayaan mo yung bata na magsalita, magpaliwanag. The appropriate pace of the speech of the interrogative is of great importance as the child may not be able to follow the quick and fluent speech of the interrogator. Kung napansin nyo rin, kung may mga bata nga dyan sa inyo, pag kinakausap niyo sila, mas mabagal. Mas mabagal at mas magaan nga or hindi ganun kalalim yung words na ginagamit niyo sa kanila. Ikaw pwede gumamit ng mga highfalutin words dyan sa mga bata. The proper comprehension of the meaning of the interrogator's statement by the child acquires significance while cautioning them about being able to exercise their rights as in the case of every other witnesses. It should be remembered that the child does not always realize what kind of statement may expose their closest family to criminal responsibility. Hindi nila gets yun. Hindi naman nila alam kung ano ang um, epekto ng pagkakasabi nila ng kanilang statements. Kung may effect ba to sa pag-aresto doon sa suspect or kung may epekto ba to sa criminal liability ng mga suspects, di ba? The child does not realize that, for instance, his father's particular act has constituted the offense or shows the causation and they confide the information that they would not reveal at the older age. Na we assume that children are honest. Sabi nga, may kasabihan nga tayo, di ba? Hindi marunong magsinungaling ang bata. Hindi sa lahat ng pagkakataon, but most of the time, a child does not know the legal repercussions of certain acts. Di naman nila alam na kapag may sinaksak ka, ah, sabihin na natin 20 years ang in prison ang katapat nun. Di naman nila alam yun. So, they tend to speak uh, more dito. They tend to speak more bluntly. Kumbaga mas prangka sila at kung ano yung na-observe nila, yun yung sasabihin talaga nila. Taking advantage of the benefit resulting from the right of the refusal of the testimony or the answers to particular questions. The significant meaning and the influence on the interrogation may have the parent or guardian's participation in the interrogation. So, pwedeng kasama yung magulang doon sa yung gagawin na interrogation. The parent is the guarantor of the rights of the child, is entitled to, and the parent's participation in the juvenile witnesses interrogation should not only consist in the formal presence. In certain cases, the parent or guardian's presence can make the child feel uncomfortable and distract them. Kaya depende talaga doon sa witness mo. So as the interrogator, you should be able to assess the situation properly. Tingin mo ba mas magiging komportable ang bata kapag katabi niya yung magulang? O baka naman maging hindi siya komportable kapag kasama yung magulang, so huwag mo na isama doon sa mismong kwarto. Siguro hayaan mo na lang na pinapanood kayo nung magulang. So, unusually vital regulation introduced in the Polish Code of Criminal Procedure, since this tong lecture natin is based on a certain research. Ito yung samples niya. Introduced to the Polish Code of Criminal Procedure by the amendment. Kayo yan. It has been unknown in the Polish proceedings so far that okay. It concerns only the children under the age of 15 aggrieved by the sex crime. So yun mga child witnesses or witness victim na naka-experience ng sex crime. Ito applicable yun. So according to this article, in cases about the crime described in a certain chapter, if a child who was under 15 in a moment of the act, one should interrogate in the capacity of the witness only once, unless significant circumstances come to light and their explanation requires another interrogation. Kasi kapag ginagawa natin yun sa bata, yung pag-i-interrogate, it may cause some trauma to them. But as police officers, you have to know the truth behind a certain fact, di ba? Kailangan mo malaman yung katotohanan sa isang bagay. So, you have to interrogate the child. Kaya dapat maingat ka sa pag-i-interrogate. Dahil most likely, isang beses mo lang siya matatanong. Dahil kapag tinanong mo pa siya ulit, baka itanong na nung magulang, bakit di niyo pa nakuha lahat ng mga kailangan nyo nung unang beses? Mas-stress na naman yung anak ko. Ganun ang sasabihin nila. Okay, unless significant circumstances come to light and their explanations require another interrogation, or when it is demanded by the suspect who did not have their own defense counsel in the course of their first interrogation of the aggrieved. Okay. Moreover, the repeated interrogations favored the secondary victimization and were commonly criticized by psychologists. In your human behavior and victimology subject, malamang na-take up nyo na to, secondary victimization. Kasi, di ba, nabiktima na sila unang beses dun sa actual na crime. And second, they may experience secondary victimization when you conduct your interrogation. Kaya nga, ayan sabi dyan, it was commonly criticized by psychologists. The introduction of the psychologist's obligatory participation in the interrogation has been assessed positively. Indeed, the victims of these kinds of offense require special treatment, not only the tact and understanding on the interrogator's side, but also the psychologist's care during the interrogation, since it is repeatedly difficult to establish the contact with the victims of the sexual abuse. The protocol compiled in the course of the interrogation is read out at the main trial without calling the child. Kumbaga, yung sinabi na lang during the interrogation ay sasabihin na lang ulit doon sa korte. And in the situation in which the sound record was made out, it is played back. Nevertheless, this regulation, through desirable concerns only the very narrow circle of friends, the victims of the sex crime. Unfortunately, the children, the victims of other offenses, are not protected. For instance, against repeated interrogations. Kaya nga, hanggat maaari, isang beses mo lang sila i-interrogate dahil they experience secondary victimization. So as mentioned above, the children, the victims under the age of 15 of the sex crime are guaranteed the participation of the psychologist during the interrogation. However, in other cases, the participation of the psychologist in the juvenile's interrogation is the more uh, worth recommendation the younger the witness is. One should constantly pay a lot of heed not to suggest anything to the child incautiously. Next is the interrogation of the elderly kapag mas matanda o as in matanda na yung ine-interrogate natin. The next subject raising standards to the interrogators are and requiring the particular form of the interrogation is the elderly person. So may special way of questioning them also, katulad sa mga bata. The cause which decides about such a necessity is the changes taking place in the organism of the elderly person, the consequences of which are often limitations occurring in the first two stages of the formation of testimonies. The processes of the perception and the memory. Yun naman ang problem mo sa matanda. Baka nakalimutan na niya, lalo na kung may sakit. The elder person's psyche in many respects starts to resemble the child's psyche. Diba? May mga sinasabi nga tayo sa matatanda, pag nag-uulyanin, parang bumabalik sa pagkabata, tumatanda ng paurong. Kasi nga, humihina na talaga ang memory nila. In the elderly people, the hearing, visual, and sense of balance impairments may take place dahil may mga matatandang na humihina na ang tenga, ang paningin nila. So, yun, magiging, di naman problem. Magiging challenge yun sa'yo. The memory of the elderly person pays less attention to the surroundings, focusing this attention on themselves. The memory of the elderly person frequently fails in the range of the recent experiences, and the gaps are often in good faith, filled with delusions. The elderly people, by and large, remember distant events as well. Furthermore, the interrogator ought to realize the possibility of mental disturbances taking place connected with the process of becoming old. The main mental disturbances are the following: dementia, Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, frontal lobe dementia, dementia resulting from Parkinson's disease, and many more. So, yun yung mga problems na kakaharapin mo kapag nag-i-interrogate ka ng matanda. Mahina na yung paningin nila, mahina na yung pandinig nila, hindi na sila masyadong magpipay attention sa surroundings nila dahil ang focus na lang nila sa sarili nila. And baka nga, may sakit pa sila. So making a decision about the interrogation of the elderly people, one should obey certain rules. Similarly, as in the case of the child's interrogation. So first, one should prepare themselves properly, gather as much information about the interrogated person as possible. Katulad lang din sa bata, di ba? Kuha ka ng impormasyon bago mo siya i-question. Magtanong ka sa teacher nila, magtanong ka sa magulang nila. But here, mga kakilala siguro. Which in the future may result in calling the expert psychologist or the geriatrician. The interrogator ought to aspire to the recording of the interrogation. So it is better if you record the interrogation. Here, similarly as in the child's interrogation, one should predict a suitable amount of time to give to the interrogated person as their statements can be inhibited. The stage of the preliminary conversation should serve to establish the contact of both sides. The interrogator should take into consideration that in the account of the elderly person, there may appear language archaisms which the elderly persons should explain if there are doubts for as for the understanding of the meaning. Baka may gagamitin silang terms na medyo hindi na natin naiintindihan kahit pa na Tagalog o English yan. Pero yun yung mga terms na gamit nung panahon nila. At kapag hindi mo naintindihan, yung term na gamit nila, ipaliwanag mo bilang interrogator. Spontaneous relation should be the uninterrupted statement of the interrogated person as far as the subject of the process is concerned. Hindi mo siya dapat i-cut habang nagsasalita. However, obtaining the spontaneous relation, obviously not always, is not difficult. But obtaining the relation deprived of personal digression of the interrogated person becomes difficult. In this case, the interrogator should show a lot of patience and not interrupt even if the interrogated person digresses from the subject. Katulad din sa bata, di ba? Rule yun. Nabanggit natin kanina na hindi mo siya pwedeng i-cut, hindi ka pwedeng mag-butt in sa mga statement nila dito para makuha mo yung spontaneous relation. One should also take into consideration that the person giving an account may lose the thread of the testimony and wanting to remind themselves will come back to the facts already reported on. Here, irritation or impatience should not be expressed. Kailangan bilang isang interrogator, mahinahon ka. Hindi ka dapat basta-bastang naiinis lang sa mga ini-interrogate mo, lalo na special cases nga ito, bata, matanda. In the stage of questions, the questions ought to be formed in the simple and clear way, thoroughly understood by the interrogated person. This should be a conversation conducted in a very friendly, full of respect and understanding atmosphere. Dahil nga mas matanda sa'yo yung ini-interrogate mo, dapat magalang ka sa kanya at mapang-intindi ka. Similarly, as in the child's interrogation, the participation of the expert psychologist is intentional. While interrogating the elderly person, one should have patience and understanding and take the circumstance of strong emotions being able to threaten their lives into account. Okay, number 3 is the interrogation of people with mental disturbances kapag may sakit sa pag-iisip. So the accomplishment of this form requires having the minimum knowledge from the field of the psychiatry and psychology by the interrogator. So as criminologists naman kayo in the future, hopefully, di ba? You already have a background on psychology. Dahil may mga criminal psychology topics naman na nadidiscuss sa inyo sa ibang subjects. On the basis of this knowledge, the trial organ will, first and foremost, be able to recognize such a person, which obviously is not always possible. The physical appearance may show the mental disturbances, the outfit, the way of walking, the posture, gestures, the expression on the face, and the psychomotor drive, hyperactivity, inhibitions, trembling, twitches, tension, fear, specific way of speaking, and others. However, not all disturbances are noticeable for laymen who are without hesitation. Obviously, in this field, the representatives of the prosecution and the judiciary organ. So, kaya mahalaga na may background sa psychology dahil may mga actions, may mga actions katulad nga ng paglalakad, yung posture niya, yung gestures niya, yung pagiging hyper niya, yung pagiging takot ng isang tao, mas maiintindihan mo kung may background ka nga sa psychology. So it is difficult at first glance to state that the interrogated person suffers from depression. And one should take such a person into account in the case of the crime victims. That is why one should remember that the people with mental disturbances are not only the people with mental retardation, dementia, and the people with a high rate of neuroticism, but also those in whom the offense has caused trauma. So basically, the person who is being interrogated, kung siya rin yung biktima, baka may trauma din siya. So mahihirapan ka rin makakuha ng mga impormasyon sa kanya. That's why this is a special case. In such cases, it is worth remembering about some rules helpful during the interrogation of these following subjects. First, before the interrogation, one should collect the medical data about the person with mental disturbances and establish if the present state allows the person to be interrogated. The final opinion in this case belongs to the psychiatrist who may participate in this activity. Whereas if the interrogator does not have the knowledge about the potential disturbances of the interrogated person, they may start having doubts as for as for this person's mental condition during the direct contact and the interrogated person, and then decide about a potential interrogation with the expert psychologist or psychiatrist's participation. Yun. Kailangan mo talaga yung tulong ng mga expert psychologist or psychiatrist dahil you are directly dealing with people with mental disturbances. Second, the preliminary stage of the interrogation has got a vital role. The interrogated person should understand their own role and trust the interrogator. In many cases, only at this stage the trial organ learns that the interrogated person suffers from some mental disturbances. Then the organ may even resign from the interrogation or postpone it in order to provide the person with the psychiatrist or the psychologist. Kasi nga, dahil may mental disturbance sila, baka hindi ka rin makakuha sa kanila ng impormasyon. So you have to assess the situation whether or not you can push through with your interrogation or baka kailangan mo na niyang ma-treat. In the course of the spontaneous relation, if it is difficult for the interrogated person to keep to the main topic, one should start the stage of the detailed questions. The questions ought to be adjusted to the intellectual possibilities of the interrogated person and made it possible for them to give short answers. It is deliberate to repeat questions in the other way to make sure that its sense is properly understood. The interrogation should last short in order not to weary or all the more not to irritate the interrogated person. The vital role of the expert psychiatrist in the interrogation with whom general tactical rules were agreed on should be emphasized here. In the course of the interrogation, the expert observes the interrogated person, gives some tactical tips to the trial organ, may also ask questions concerning the state and the feelings of the interrogated person. Because being the interrogator, hindi sa lahat ng pagkakataon, maiintindihan mo yung people with mental disturbances, and psychiatrists or even psychologists will be able to do so. Kaya sila ang makapagbibigay sa'yo ng tips kung papaano ka makakakuha ng impormasyon. At ganun din, kapag nasa trial na, sila din ay dapat present in order to help the court understand better. And lastly, the interrogation of the people in critical health condition, yung mga may sakit. The issues of obtaining relations from the people in the critical health conditions is extremely complicated as the very decision about the interrogation is made owing to bad prognosis as for recovering of the interrogated person. Dahil may sakit na nga siya, may pinagdadaanan na siya sa katawan niya, baka hindi rin maging maganda sa health niya kapag nag-push through ka sa interrogation. Kaya yung pagdesisyon pa lang kung papayag ba o hindi ay medyo mahirap na. The critical health condition of the potential witness can be the result of the physical injury or mental trauma, which seriously disrupt the functioning of the organism, yung tao. The trial organ can make a decision about the interrogation in the face of the necessity of the choice between obtaining testimony from the aggrieved person, thanks to whom it will be possible to take uncovering action, and the interrogation in the conditions of the worsening state of the witnesses health, which can as well appear to be the action not being able to be repeated. Not only does the limited psychophysical competence of the witness decides about the peculiarity of this form of the interrogation, but also on typical places of the interrogation, the time of this action, and the extraordinariness of the situation in which both the interrogator and the interrogated person take place. The psychosomatic state of the human being who is potentially to give an account can exclude any contact with them, but may enable a short and suitably prepared interrogation. The limitations can also be connected with the specificity of undertaken medicinal treatments. Baka dahil kailangan niya ng gamot, hindi mo siya makausap ng maayos dahil nagagamot nga siya. So, in all the cases, it is the physician who makes a final decision about the admissibility of the interrogation, and the therapeutic actions have the priority over trial criminological ones. So, it is always the health of the person being interrogated, uh, it is the priority over the trial. Kailangan maging mabuti, maayos muna yung ah, pangangatawan nung i-interrogate mo, kaysa doon sa mga impormasyon na kailangan mo para doon sa trial. The vital factor making decisions for the physician about the admissibility of the interrogation easier is, apart from the knowledge about the subject in the scope and the form of the interrogation, also their participation in the action. The physician then supervises the state of the patient in the course of the prying, plays the role of the expert assessing the capability of the witness to reconstruct, and at the same time can demand to discontinue the started interrogation when the physician acknowledges that the good of the ill person requires this, or when the capability of the patient to reconstruct observations is obvious. So, andun ang physician, andun ang doktor nung i-interrogate mo para mag-supervise. Siya rin ang magsasabi kung, sabi nga dyan, he plays the role of expert assessing dahil i-assess niya kung maaari pa bang ituloy yung interrogation dahil nga baka makasama na yun sa health nung ini-interrogate. So, pwede niyang ipatigil yung interrogation. Here, among others, pharmacological drugs may wield influence on this capability. The presence of the physician enhances the patient's sense of the safety and has a soothing effect on their mood. This very complex situation causes that, in practice, it is often resigned from this trial action, assuming that such people cannot manage the standard interrogation. Kaya may mga pagkakataon, hindi na nag-interrogate doon sa victim, tinutuloy na lang yung kaso based sa mga ebidensya na nakalap na. Sometimes it is made do with the attempt to talk with the person in the critical health condition, and only notes are taken. So if there is a danger that the witness will not be able to be interrogated at the trial, the party or the prosecutor or another organ directing the proceedings can turn to the court with the demand for interrogating them by the court. So making a decision about the interrogation, one should take these vital rules into account. During the interrogation, the presence of the physician is necessary, who, previously assessing the scope and the method of the interrogation, consented to conduct it. So, kailangan mo nga ng consent ng doktor para ma-interrogate mo yung taong yun. The physician signs the protocol confirming by the interrogator in this way the reason for the lack of interrogated person's signature. Kasi nga, dahil may sakit, baka hindi siya makapirma. So, si doktor na ang gagawa nun. The physician's confirmation of their participation in the interrogation by their signature is tantamount to the approval of the conformity of the content of the protocol to the course of the trial actions. The resignation from the spontaneous relation, announcing of which requires the activeness and the strength on the side of the interrogated person in order to obtain answers for limited number of questions written in the protocol. So, kailangan hindi hindi ka lalayo doon sa mga tanong na dapat mo lang itanong. Si doktor ang magsusupervise kasi nun. One should, in the first place, ask, for example, if the interrogated person knows the perpetrator, what losses they suffered, and finish with the question concerning any other potential evidential sources. So, in this sense, your interrogation should also be very brief lang. Hindi mo siya pwedeng i-interrogate katulad ng ibang tao na kalahating araw, isang buong araw mo sila pinagtatanong. Hindi pwede yung ganun. If the conditions are favorable, one can ask questions of detailed type concerning, for instance, the circumstances of the event. Pwede mong itanong yon. Characteristic features of the offender. Sinong gumawa nito sa inyo? Pwede mo ba siyang i-describe? The instruments of the crime. Anong ginamit sa pananakit sa'yo? Martilyo, tubo, kung ano man. The offender's way of acting, the content of the statements, the relations between the event's participants, and the characteristics of the losses. Making notes by the official from the prosecution organs about the heard statement of the person in the critical health condition in the situation when the realization of no previous variants is possible. So, pwede yun. The predicted reservations from that specific article are related to such a note and that one must not exchange the evidence from the accused person's explanations or the witness's testimony with the content of the letter, the record, or the official notes. Such a note can only constitute the information about the listed events in it and their circumstances, provide tips for further proceedings of the trial and operational organs, but cannot be the equivalent of the testimonies. In this connection, and in view of the potential difficulty in the next contacts with the evidence source, one should provide the court with the equivalent of the directness in the form of the magnetic recording of the course of the interrogation. So, pwede mong gamitin sa korte yon, yung notes na sinulat mo or yung recording na ginamit mo or na nakuha mo during the interrogation of the people in critical health conditions. One should emphasize that the base of the effectiveness of the testimony is an appropriate contact with the witness being in critical health condition. The contact ought to be on the interrogated person's side, marked with a particular tact and kindness, which is connected with the situation of the person giving evidence, the compulsory situation, frequently with the dramatic subject of the relation, and sometimes with the indispensability of phrasing the issue of the victimological nature. So the above mentioned principles are not rules without any exceptions. Kasi nga, depende sa tao kung papaano mo sila ititreat, kung papaano mo sila i-interrogate, or kung i-interrogate mo ba talaga sila. Depende nga, kahit na may mga ganitong principles. One should always remember that neither the particular tactics of the interrogation nor the credibility of the obtained relation depend on the conventional criteria of the age, the education, the eloquence, the mental level, and others. But they must be described individually and against a background of the entirety of the decisions made in the case. The interrogated person should be treated with a respect, and one should take care of the fact that the frank testimony would be accompanied by the satisfaction resulting from the feeling of the well-accomplished duty. It concerns all the interrogators, but in particular, those ones for whom this study has been dedicated.